Look at this fancy framed shot here. I hate hand holding the videos. I feel like they're too shaky, and it's too much of a YouTuber thing, if that makes sense. So I took the car to the dyno on a whim. My fab guy Tom was around. I was like, hey, I know it's going to be a disaster. It's just going to be hard for it to go well. And I had a bunch of issues just doing short drives. I was like, let's just go and work out the demons real quick, because stuff's going to come up. What's cool about the dyno is I get people there and I tune their cars, and they're always very apologetic. I didn't know, and I don't want to, I'm giving you a hard time, and my car is difficult, and I didn't have this stuff ironed out. And, I say the same thing on the radio shows. I'm like, this is the first time this thing's getting wound out. I'm sure, like, it wasn't running good enough for you to do all of this. It's your first car, or it's your first Turbo LS build, and you're not sure what to do with vacuum lines, coolant hoses. All that stuff's really normal, and I tell the people that, and I think sometimes they think I'm patronizing them, but it's true. So I wanted to share, as I always do. It did not go... It went, I guess, let's reflect. It went really well. I brought the car home, but a lot of stuff went wrong, and now I have homework, and that's what I want to share with you guys so you can look at it first. So I had it on the roller, and my low boost hit went well, and I apparently have an issue with my crank ventilation where I put it. I don't have excessive crank pressure. The engine doesn't smoke. None of those issues. So what I did was, there is a oil fill cap, the Holley oil fill cap valve cover, and then there's a lifter valley cover, and they put an oil fill cap in it. And I thought I was going to be clever, so they sent the oil fill cap. So their oil fill cap is threaded with an O-ring. It's not the classic large cantilever. It doesn't do like the quarter turn lock. It doesn't have a thread the size of your finger in it like a stock oil fill cap. It threads down nice, and they have a baffled insert with a 10 AN orb fitting into the top. And I got all that from them. It was very nice of them. And I put it in the lifter valley cover because I was like, well, I don't want to pull off the vent every time I want to put oil in the car. So I thought I was being slick, and I hid the vent in the lifter valley. Well, apparently that has to fill at some point because oil just pours out on D-cell, literally like fire hoses out. I have an awesome clip that Tom caught because we kept getting oil out of it, and I'm like, man, I'm getting excessive oil, and I don't want to reach in there when it's hot and mess around with everything. So I kind of folded it over, and we put it in a thing, and then it was creating it completely destroyed the ventilation system. It was completely capped at that point, and I wasn't thinking. I was just trying to solve problems quickly and move ahead to see if I had other issues. So classically, what I like to do is make large jumps, and then see if it's going to give me an issue right away. So I was moving fast, and I'm like, whatever, and I crimped off the line too hard. I bent it too hard and I just eliminated my crankcase ventilation. So immediately on startup, the right side turbo is just pouring smoke because it couldn't return the oil. So then the oil's coming out of like the center section and the drain because it's backing up. It was quite a thing. And I made a hit after that. So like some of the video is extremely smoky, and that's because I fogged out the entire business, the whole paving, the 3 bays, which is completely covered in oil smoke and whatever. So I keep noticing I'm getting tons of shine in my glasses. It doesn't matter, but man, it's distracting me. So we jumped ahead, and I uncovered that, and then we put it into there was a Gatorade bottle in the trash, and we packed it with paper towels, and we shoved the hose in it, and we put it on the rad support. And this is the best video clip, is on D-cell, it does something with the... People can chime in, but obviously there's a ton of vacuum pressure, and I think it's stopping the oil from draining back from the valley cover, and it's staying up in there, and then it just comes out of that hose like crazy. Like, it's clean and clear, and just the oil come flying out. It's hilarious. It throws the bottle across the room, throws it right into the fan, and then the oil gets all over the fan, and the oil's under the car, and just it's not going to rust for a while. That's the positive takeaway from that. So we did clear that up. We did wait for it to cool off. We moved the cap to there, which I'm assuming it should be. So that's the oil fill. And then we put the valve cover vent, which is the 10 hose, into the rocker cover, the valve cover. And what's cool is these valve covers are low profile. They don't have any baffle at all. And it completely eliminated the issue. No more oil pouring out, no issues, no ventilation, no drain, no crankcase pressure, blah, 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 blah. So in the fitting, there is baffles built in. So the bottom of that fitting, I should like link it or show a picture of it, but it has air holes in the sides of it, and then it goes up in. So oil can't be slung directly out from the rocker. And the other neat thing about that is that valve cover with that custom oil fill cap fitting is way over to the end of the cylinder head, and the rocker isn't even in line with it. So that's a positive also. The other thing is, a couple hits in, I wasn't getting the power I expected. Obviously, there was a ton of reasons for that. And one big one was my back pressure was flying up. And I'm like, I did not expect to have that much back pressure. I have not used these turbos, but I didn't expect to have excessive back pressure, especially because so the car makes 7 pounds on the wastegate, and it had 6 pounds of back pressure. And it always seems to have less pressure in the piping than it does in the intake, and that's because the hot air coming out is less dense. So there's something neat going on. My intercooler is so good. This might happen on others. I just don't have the data, and most of the time I use an undersized intercooler, so the temperatures are not good. So what's neat to see is it's creating more density as it's going through the intercooler. The boost pressure is increasing from end to end there because it is making the air more dense. And back pressure was flying up, and I'm like, you know what? Watch this. So I changed the boost to extremely high, and I think I have the logs. I'll show you guys the logs too. I should at the end of this. Regardless, I ran about 22 pounds through it, and I had 63 pounds of back pressure. And I was like, I guarantee my flexes collapsed. I guarantee it. So I said, hey, Tom, watch this. I turned off the boost control. It went back down to 7 pounds approximately. And on 7 pounds, when it used to have 6 pounds of back pressure, that had increased to mid-20s easily. So that's instead of 1-to-1 or less than 1-to-1, which is ideal, it went to 4-to-1. So it had 4 pounds of exhaust pressure for every 1 pound of boost pressure. And I was like, guarantee it's the flex. And it sounded bad too. You could hear it during the pulls. As the later on we went, it must have been closing the longer I was on the dyno. It might have been even closing up on the street. Who knows? Really, there's no way to tell there. It could have been closing up without adversely affecting back pressure. So I think it could have been choking it without really increasing pressure until it totally folded up. So I cut them out. Well, I didn't cut them out. I removed, let me get a flashlight maybe. So here's the up pipe. So that comes off the header. This is the header, and this goes up into the turbo, and then the wastegate sits here. So what's neat about this one is you can physically see into that wastegate hole and see that this has completely collapsed and folded itself down to like less than an inch. I will get a light on the other side of it for you guys. So yeah, I was able to just pull it out and be like, yeah, I got about an inch worth of exhaust diameter, inner diameter. Let's get a, this one can be pretty bright when it's cranked up. Of course I have Milwaukee flashlights. So let's try shining it through the back. It's hard to see how small that hole is, but it is like completely covering the exhaust. What if we put it in here? Yeah, it has, and I tried shoving a pry bar in here so it's looser. I tried to see if I could knock it out with a pry bar, but it is so tough in there. It has closed it off. So that is a bad one. I haven't pulled the other side off yet. I don't think it's important to, because I'm going to put it back together, and when Tom is far enough with the hearse that we can move it, I'm going to just trade him this and the hearse, because he's going to do, we were waiting to do exhaust on this anyway. We need to do dump tubes on the wastegates. They're just blowing down from the headlight into the bumper. Luckily, it didn't seem to affect it. There's enough space there to just dissipate, because this is literally an open cavern underneath. My oil thing we took care of, so I'm going to go over that. I still have to install like my diff temp. I never wired. I might go to a 4-port now in the front. So yeah, this is like a, I wanted to see how all that would work out. I like being able to go down to, it made 7 pounds, 6.8, 7 pounds on average. It did make a little over 500 horsepower to the tire there. So I think that's, that should be my lowest. I'd hate to spring it for like 10 and make more than I can put down. The neat thing about having that dynamic range is being able to turn it down to a point where it absolutely will hook, and then putting it in later, or giving it the, like, giving traction control the authority to pull that much power out is also extremely functional, as you can imagine. So I have that. What else I don't like is the brakes. I don't like how the brakes work. I have like a conglomerate to make it fit, and I thought would be a good idea. And I have a Fairmont booster because it's physically smaller in every dimension, smaller to fit the valve cover, because my valve cover is like that close to the booster. So that fits, and then it's shorter so it doesn't put the master out as far. The stock V6 stuff was very large, like the booster was gigantic, and maybe it needs to be that big. But I bought a stock V6 master cylinder for the brakes, and I'm going to install that and bleed that, and that means having finishing lines make new short pieces to come off of that to my T fittings. That's no big deal. I just want to try out the stock booster, and if that all is still funny, I'm probably going to buy like a motion kit that comes with the manual brake adapter. And I'm like, if it's always going to be funny, I'll just go with the stiff manual brake pedal too. Why have all of that real estate used and complexity if I can't get amazing brake pedal feel? I don't think I want to go Hydro Boost. I tried to fit it, and I wasn't a huge fan of that either. The way that was, I didn't like it. I didn't like how it physically fit and some other things, and I was nervous about running the power steering hoses all over to that, and then also the way it was clocked, the hoses were in a funny spot. I don't remember liking it very much at all, so that's why I abandoned it. Might be worth revisiting, but yeah, anyway. So I might get a 4-port and hook that up. Everything else is working good. My sensors are working good. It's neat to see the back pressure rocket and immediately find that this was the issue. It's neat to see that stuff, because on low boost, it knocked 100 horsepower out of it. On 7 pounds, it went from 5 and change to 419. So you can see how it's a decent amount of power. It's a percentage. So the higher you go, the worse that gets. Transmission's good, shift's good, the lockup works, the converter feels good. I didn't really get to mess with much else because of the oil issue. It took up most of the middle dyno poles, and then by that time I had already screwed up my flexes. So at some point I was like, man, this power level is much lower than I anticipated, and then this reared up. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, it's easy to feel disappointed, but I should remember at the same time, and you guys should also remember on your projects, the amount of things that did work well is staggering. So just remember that stuff. I always say that when people are, and it's true, it's not like I'm not fluffing people. It's a perspective thing, because they're like, man, my car is terrible, and you had trouble, and I made it worse, and we didn't effectively use my time. And I'm like, well, you did 100 things here, and 90% of them work great. So take that away from this, and there's small things to do, and look at what I have to do. I'm working with a setup here similar to, this is definitely wilder than I've ever done, and it's complex, and there's a lot of things, and it's expensive when I'm used to throwing on some garbage that works, and it has a stock truck. Everything's designed to work, and it does work, and you put fuel and air in, and it's good. And if it's under your power expectation, you'd laugh it off because it costs nothing, and you're happy with it. But as soon as you spend a bunch of money, don't get me wrong, a lot of this was sponsored, but again, to fill gaps there and not have it look terrible or completely underutilize the other things that are on there. So here's the thing: when you build a motor with Summit and you get parts from Holly and you get all this cool stuff and it makes 700 horsepower, you look bad and you're making them look bad, right? And if I do a terrible job on Fab, they're like, man, why does this guy have $1,000 in the intake? And then, it's the whole thing that I get on people's case about, right? So right now I'm hating on myself because I'm like, man, there's a lot of money and not a lot of power there and blah, blah, blah. So obviously that makes me anxious too. I want to see it do well, but again, it's important for you guys to see spending the money doesn't guarantee a result. Keeping it simple usually does. Cost effective makes it easier to swallow the pill when it doesn't get where you want, within reason. So that's why I like to live there comfortably, but you can't stay there forever. It's nice to see all of this stuff. It's nice to show you guys this stuff. I would love to see it performing better. The back pressure and everything else was looking good. Intake temps were amazing. They were ambient or almost sub-ambient at times, which is awesome, which is what I wanted, which is I gave it a ton of intercooling ability. That's what I wanted. And also, I have the world's smallest transcooler under there. Holly was gracious enough to send it to me, but at that time they didn't have many in stock, and I got this one. And then when I received it, I'm like, man, this is dimensionally very small and probably won't be able to keep up. And it's true. It takes a while, but the temps eventually get to a point where they are over 200 and won't come down. So it steadily climbs the entire time I drive, even if it's in lockup and everything else. And for this car and all my cars, I like to be able to submarine the temperatures. I like the cooling system to be over effective. Some of you don't share that sentiment. Other cars, it doesn't matter. But this one, it has air conditioning. It's just not, I want to make sure all this stuff is obviously done being a pain in the ass before we charge AC lines and deal with that. So yeah, with the air conditioning and everything else, the cooling system has its work cut out for it. So you don't want to be on the edge at all, in my opinion. I can knock my radiator temps down to absolutely nothing, like straight down to 160, no problem. I can knock it back down into coolant enrichment levels. So that's great. And it's only using a percentage of the fan. This is a PWM, variable speed DC fan with a controller attached to it from a C6 Corvette. It fits my radiator great. Everything else, it works great. I'm only running at about 60%, and it just knocks the temperatures down to nothing. So all that's good. I expect everything else to be worry-free temperature-wise. I bought a TrueCool 40K, which everyone says is absolutely amazing. It's magic. And we're going to mount that. Like I said, I have surplus amount of room in the front of my bumper. And the only thing that I'm stacking a lot, right? But my radiator is working really well. The rest of this is working well. It's not even shrouded fully and it's working that well. We do plan to make like top plates to shroud it all in. And I think at the same time, I'm going to have Tom mount the TrueCool way up in the front. And then we'll see how all that goes and how it affects my temperatures. I have temperatures now without it, and we'll see temperatures with it. Blah, 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 right? So all of that's in my head. Solutions for all of that are in my head. Brakes, everything. So my fuel system's doing incredible. I started off just for fun to experiment with the returnless. I didn't think it would be fantastic. I thought it would be neat to see if it does do well. And it did pretty awful, which I think was partly because of out of the surge tank, it goes into the regulator and then it blows through it all the way to the front floor pan about here, and then it hits a filter, and then it splits from a 10 to 2 8s, and then it hits the rails, and that was it. And I had fluctuations in pressure like crazy, and I think what was happening is So the fuel comes out of the fuel line and it hits the regulator. Well, when the regulator's open, it's easier for the fuel, I think, to hit the regulator and get stuffed back down. So when all the pumps would kick on, it would create this forced loop instead of jumping over through the regulator. And I was like, this is a high horsepower car. Why am I messing with fuel like this? I know it's not an appropriate solution. So I did the regulator up front, and now I have, the car was starting funny too. I was like, why does this start like trash? I hate when my stuff starts like trash, when people see it starting like trash. It hurts my feelings. So I did all that, and the car starts amazing now, and I have outstanding fuel pressure, and I have fuel flow out the wazoo. I can show in the logs at the car at some point made 775 horsepower to the tire on 70% alcohol. My base fuel pressure is 30, so it was on low 20s, so it was like 52 pounds of fuel pressure, and I was using 36% of a 210 injector. So I have massive amount of fuel flow, which I expected to have way more than I needed. This PQI regulator has a really big return orifice. It's gigantic. Like, that's one of the coolest things about this new PQI they made, because the other regulators have like a pinhole in them. We talk about that all the time, about how you have to mess with them. And this one's no exception. I did the video on having to cut down the spring inside to get less than punch off pressure for my pumps. At 80 pounds, they just self-relieve in the hat itself. So instead of pumping, when they hit a pressure source, they have a relief valve and it just spews out of the top of the pump. So that's what was happening. Also, you want to stay away from that. It's well known that a 450 fades at higher pressure, and then at 80 it caps. So the 525 and the other models, like I think that 485 and some other ones, they have a higher pressure relief in them, but in-tank pumps don't like to be high pressure. So you stay away from that, and that's why I did 30 base, figuring I might run up to 30 or low 30 PSI. So that puts my fuel pressure, you know, from, if I run 35 pounds, I'm at 65 pounds. I'm still pretty well under 80 pounds total of fuel pressure, away from the relief cuts and everything else. But the other thing that happens is the injectors and the pumps are in such a happy spot that the pressure is coming up, and what's happening is so I'm running on one of the 450s, and then at roughly 8 to 10 pounds, the second pumps come on. So 2 and 3 come on. So you'll actually see a spike in fuel pressure. I saw it on like my truck, many things where I run stage pumps. If you're turning it on a little bit too early, you'll get like a 10-pound hit. And what'll happen there is fuel pressure is coming up and the second pumps are on and you have pressure and flow. Your VE starts to get funny. Your VE gets lower around 10 pounds. Like it comes up to 110, and then it dips down to like 100 again, and then it comes back up. You want to stay away from stuff like that if you can. So you turn on your pumps later. I could stage 2 and 3 separately, but I think that's dumb. It's needless complexity and failure points. So what's happening is the regulator is big enough that it only bumps like 2 pounds. It's pretty cool there. I'm pretty happy with the transition. I might push it later so it doesn't mar up the VE table as bad. But yeah, I have outstanding amount of fuel flow, which you would expect. I also have the tank extremely low from my visual settings, and what's neat to see also is a factory car has a insane amount of smoothing and averaging on your gas tank. A lot of you might know that it barely moves, and you have to be in a long, like a 270 degree on-ramp at a decent amount of G-force to actually affect that fuel gauge, right? Well, the Holley doesn't have, the slowest it can sample is like 1 time a second, and you can slow it down through the fuel level input it has specifically. You can slow that down only so much. So you'll see when you corner and accelerate hard, the fuel amount will move quite a bit. And as annoying as that might seem, if you're sitting or rolling straight, the minute you eliminate your G-forces, it settles and you can see how much fuel is in it. It's no big deal. But what's cool to observe there is how much the fuel is moving in your tank. I mean, the pickup, that fuel level is where the pump is. The fuel level sender is attached to the fuel pump basket. So it's neat to see the amount of slosh that's actually happening, and then realize that none of that is affecting me because of my surge tank setup. I'm really starting to appreciate the surge tank setup and how well it works, and you don't have to cut up your tank and do crazy things. So it's really put a lot of ideas into my head where I used to modify the fuel tank quite a bit. And now I'm like, man, I can just feed one of these tanks and it solves 90% of the issues. If I hadn't blown out my flex and everything, my plan was to like have nearly no fuel. It has like a quarter tank in it, which would absolutely slosh with even the low amount of power, because the car is not like a turbo truck or anything. But I wanted to floor it on like 800 horsepower on the way home a bunch of times with very low in tank capacity, and see if it cuts out and see if my fuel pressure dips off. So that was going to be one of my experiments. But yeah, so I'm testing a lot of things. There's a lot of stuff up in the air. There's stuff I'm changing right now. And I know you guys, it's been a while since I rambled about all of it. So those are all my thoughts in my head about, wow, we're at 25 minutes here, not including what I'm going to stuff in dyno video. But that should be pretty quick because we didn't film a lot because it was mostly a disaster with troubleshooting. So yeah, that's how I know I would want to hear this stuff. I know you guys want to hear this stuff. A percentage of you that are vocal anyway. To see all of that. What I have, what's been happening, what I changed. I mean, I changed the pumps. I put the return on it. I moved the regulator. I did a lot of that stuff. Man, I'm going to change my boost controller solenoid probably because I don't want any less than 7 pounds, but I do want, you know, more than, I got like 20 max, I think. And maybe I shouldn't change it at all because these guys closed up. And after these, who knows how long they've been closed up, right? That's something I don't know, a variable I don't know. My back pressure did look good, but I didn't have my boost control working and was mostly on very low boost. So it probably wasn't affecting it, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so there's where we are. There's where we're changing. Power steering's good. The other thing I had an issue is you can see oil under the car on the dyno. You can also see coolant from the back of the tire over here. My steam vent stuff was leaking a little bit. There's 75 4AN fittings in there, and one of them was loose, and we got that tightened up on the dyno. So that stopped. Just a lot of stupid little stuff like that. I think that's it for all of that. Put oil in it, drove it home, no problem. Sounded like a tractor because of how closed off the exhaust stuff is. I'm excited, maybe if Tom has enough time to do I would like to do, what do they call it, NASCAR or boom tube or whatever. Side pipes, not really side pipes. I hate like the C3 Corvette boomer side pipes, but I want to get it back by the tire. I don't really want to go over the exhaust. Like I said, I'm changing my mind about the exhaust about 1,000 times. So yeah, there's where we are. I think that's enough rambling. Have a good day. Bye.